Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the international edition of today's The Hindu newspaper and look at all the relevant articles which are important for your examination, be it at the prelims level or be it at the mains level. Along with that, we shall also be analyzing how to go about with answer writing. Taking the help of certain practice questions, we shall take a look at the nuances of answer writing, whereby you can improve your chances for the mains exam as well. Having said that, all the candidates, the serious aspirants who want to prepare for the year 2026, for the year 2025, if you want guidance, if you want any sort of guidance, any kind of help from the best educators of the country, from the best test series, etc., do fill out the form given in the description below and ace your preparation further going ahead. Now, without further ado, let us take a look at the topic that we are going to discuss today. So today in total, we are going to have a discussion for around 11 topics. Now here, basically the first 3 topics which have appeared in the editorial section, that has got to do with the aspect of nutrition, food, as well as agriculture, owing to the fact that today is the World Food Day. So you have articles associated with that. Now what we will do, we will take these articles and discuss separate facets associated with agricultural issues in our country, the issue with productivity in our country, and also address the aspect of undernutrition which our country faces. So this is going to be very relevant for your mains examination as well as for your prelims. Then another article, that is the deeper role, talks about US's role in the region of West Asia, where US is supplying weapons to Israel and is unable to rein in Israel's action. Then a Nobel for explaining why nations fail. This is a follow-on article to yesterday's piece where we had discussed about the reason why you had people being awarded the Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize in Economics has been given for wealth inequality and the study associated with that. So this article deals with the institutional role in determining the wealth inequality, the types of institutions that you have. On the need to make more containers, this is about the logistics and the issue of greater trade volumes being tied to the amount of containers being produced in a country. So here, first 3, they are relevant for your GS paper 3. All the 3 topics. Then the deeper role, this is associated with your GS paper 2. Then a Nobel for explaining why nations fail, that is also associated with GS paper 3. Same with the aspect of containers as well. Coastal flooding harms different tree species differently. Now, with the help of this, we are just going to take a look at the concept of dendrochronology. So here, again, relevant for your GS paper 1 or mostly GS paper 3. Then few of the articles we are going to refer from a very brief aspect, a very brief purview, relevant only for your prelims. So India-US conclude $3.5 billion deal for the UAVs, the armed UAVs. Center sets up 3 AI research hubs for health, agri and sustainable cities. Then the sufferers awarded. Now this is an editorial section and an editorial piece of article, but then that is not very important in terms of mains analysis. Here we will get an idea about the people or the group which has been given Nobel Peace Prize and the reason for that. Then the names are the ones which are going to be relevant for your prelims. Then government seeks to rein in firms greenwashing Indian consumers. So what is the concept of greenwashing and what are the new directives issued by the government? So overall, we are going to have a comprehensive discussion covering all the various facets in the newspaper. Starting with the first article of the day. And the article is, a food sufficient India needs to be hunger free too. This is relevant for your GS paper 3, appeared in the page 8 of the international edition of the newspaper. So what is this about? So when we talk about a food sufficient India, that in itself talks about a country which now doesn't face food scarcity. from the period of around 1960s all the way till the present situation, we have come a long way in terms of ensuring food sufficiency. From a country which used to be on the lookout for grants and grant in aids of grains, to a country which is almost amongst the top producers of agricultural products across the world, we have covered a significantly substantial journey. And that is something to be lauded about. But having said that, we need to be hunger free. And here hunger basically refers to the quality of nutrition, the quality of food, rather than the aspect of quantity. So here, hunger free or zero hunger, that was a part of the Millennium Development Goals as well. And that is a very important part in the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, by the way, all this is being discussed in the purview that today is the World Food Day. So that you can keep in mind that you have 16th of October as World Food Day. Okay. And what is the theme for this year? The theme has been the right to food for better life and a better future. That is the intrinsic theme associated with the World Food Day this year. Right to food for a better life and a better future. Now, this right to food, if let's suppose it is ensured for everyone, then we will be able to achieve the concept or the situation of zero hunger. And mind you, this is important even for your mains examination, that in the Sustainable Development Goals, which need to be achieved by the year 2030, zero hunger is the goal number 2. SDG number 2 deals with zero hunger to be achieved by the year 2030. Now, the present situation, if you take a look at it, the stock take which was done by the UN agencies, they have indicated that more than 600 million people worldwide are expected to face hunger by the year 2030. Hunger here refers to lack of quality food supply and the lack of quality nutrition, right? Now, one of the reasons is high food prices that has impacted many nations across the world. And due to this lack of nutrition, people or population across the world, they are suffering from various health impacts also. For example, iron deficiency has been one of the causative factors for increased prevalence of anemia in the woman. Now, when women suffer from anemic conditions, then automatically it impacts the health of the offspring or the child as well. So it is a kind of a vicious cycle where lack of nutrition leads to anemic condition or anemic motherhood or maternity. Now it can sometimes lead to maternal mortality at the time of childbirth itself, which happens in the case of underdeveloped and developing countries. And in case, let's suppose there is a successful childbirth, then the child is either undernourished or doesn't have the required amount of let's suppose the body metrics which are required, and then again this goes on and is carried forward to the next generation. So that is why this needs to be broken. So prevalence of anemia in women aged between 15 to 49 has remained around 30%. In countries like India, the anemic proportion is as high as around 50% and more also. Now, 1 in 3 people worldwide, they suffer from food insecurity or food deficiency, which has led to impacts such as stunting in children, where the height is not as per the normalcy of their particular age, wasting, where you don't have the muscle mass developing as per the age requirement, or you also have, due to the wrong nutrition or the imbalanced diet which is taken in, you also have obesity and overweight. So all these, they will lead to health disasters, and they are leading to health disasters in various different countries, India included. Now, the access to nutrition, the access to food suffers from or actually faces certain challenges. What are those challenges? So there, rising global conflicts. Global conflicts anywhere that you see. be it in the region of Africa, amongst the nations themselves, be it in the region of West Asia or in the region of Eurasia owing to the wars, be it in the region of Southeast Asia where you don't have regional connectivity, be it in the region of the Latin America, again where you have national differences. So global conflicts always lead to food being impacted quite significantly. We know that in the aftermath of wars, for example in Afghanistan, for example in the region of Palestine, all these areas, in the region of Ukraine, availability of food becomes very scarce. So quality nutrition as a whole is something you can easily forget. So that is a major challenge. Then climate vulnerability is on the rise, due to which there are crop failures, heat waves, drought-like conditions to be followed by flash floods, leads to billions of dollars worth of crops and food grains getting wasted every year. So that is a challenge for which we need better forecasting and we need climate resilient agriculture to take over. And there has also been economic slowdown in many of the underdeveloped and developing countries, and that is something which has impacted the access to food for a larger population. Now here, when we talk about the global situation which is prevalent with regards to availability of food and with regards to the nutritional availability, you will observe that the data indicates that close to around, across the globe, close to around 757 million people were undernourished. That is 9.4% of the global population. That is huge. Then it is disproportionate in various parts of the world. So in Africa, for example, you have 20% of the population which is facing hunger. In Asia, you have 8.1%, around 6.2% in Latin America, and Caribbean 7.3% in Oceania, that is in the region of Australia and New Zealand. So you can see that Africa with the coming or in the coming times is going to face the burden of maximum number of undernourished population, and they are not economically well to do. But in the present day context, the absolute maximum number is something that you observe in Asia. In Asia, the maximum number of undernourished population is amongst the highest. So in our country, we face the problem of the same magnitude. Right? Asia is the home to the largest number of undernourished population. Now here, when we talk about undernutrition, undernutrition means, in simplest of the terms, you are not getting the required nutrients that you want. Let's suppose you are consuming in your daily staple just, let's suppose, rice and pulses. Now, you will get some amount of nutrition, but not the holistic diet that you need. So, undernutrition is caused because of variety of reasons. And there are certain biases inherently built into this entire aspect of undernutrition. So when we talk about the biases, there are two types of biases. One is the rural bias. What do we mean by that? Rural bias. It basically means that population or the rural population tends to suffer from undernutrition much more as compared to the urban population. Urban population suffers less from undernutrition, and that is largely owing to the fact that you have better access to public distribution systems, you have better access or better economic condition comparatively amongst the median population. So that is why rural population overall, which lacks these particular facilities or the availability, they suffer from undernutrition more. Then you also have what is referred to as a gender bias. Gender bias. Now that basically means that women population, they expect or they suffer from the malaise of undernutrition much more as compared to male population. This is largely an attribute of the societies where the women are not that empowered. They don't have enough amount of economic might. So that is basically the two kind of inherent biases that you can attribute to undernutrition. But overall, when you take a look at undernutrition, mostly it is, when we talk about the features of it, mostly it is product of the economic outcome. Product of economic outcomes. Okay, you have the economic outcome. So wherever you have economically well-to-do societies, generally you will find that undernutrition is not there. But that is not always the case. While it has been found out that when we talk about the cost of a healthy diet, what do we say as a cost of a healthy diet, which includes a holistic and a wholesome meal, including all the required nutrients. Now that cost of healthy diet is something which is very costly in majority of the societies. For example, when we talk about this cost of a healthy diet, it has risen in recent years worldwide to around $3.96 in purchasing power parity terms, right? And this is variable again as expected. It varies from one part of the world to the other. In regions of Asia, you have the cost of a healthy diet to be around $4.2, again in purchasing power parity terms, right? Now that means those people basically who want to get that healthy diet will need to spend at least $4.2 per meal to get that healthy diet. Now that is something which is a problem. Because as per 2011 census in India, if we talk about the conditions in India, as per the 2011 census, the share of rural population in India who despite spending 100% of their money to get that healthy diet, they basically would be unable to afford a healthy diet despite spending 100% of the income. And that is close to around 63.3%. In simple terms, let's suppose you consider rural India. In rural India, any individual earns rupees X on a daily basis. Even after spending all that money of rupees X, still there would be around 52 crores of people in rural India who would not be able to afford a healthy diet, even after spending all their income. Which tells you that this cost of a healthy diet, that needs to be brought down. How will you bring it down? By government schemes, by government measures. And there have been government interventions in various different parts of the globe. Now, that is the reason that when you take a look at, despite the fact that the cost of healthy diet is rising, but overall across the globe, the absolute number of population who is not getting that healthy diet, that is declining. That means more and more people are getting access to that healthy diet. Now, major factor is economic, that you don't have the economies or you don't have high per capita income to support that. But also there are other factors why people don't get healthy diet and why people suffer from undernutrition. So if you take a look at the factors which lead to undernourishment amongst the population, that can be referred to by 4 A's. 4 A's. What are those 4 A's? You have availability. Is the food available? Is a healthy diet available? That is a major issue. Now, there can be geographical isolation in question. In many of the areas, the regions are isolated, so availability can be an issue. Then also accessibility. Do you have enough access in terms of income levels, in terms of access to the market, in terms of empowerment levels? Do you have access to a healthy diet? That is a limitation. Then comes awareness. Are we aware really of what constitutes a healthy diet? Or as is the case, which has been basically further cemented by studies by Lancet, that even the most affluent Indians, if you talk about them, who are earning very well and the top few percent, now even they don't have proper nutrition, as in their diets lack certain things like protein, etc. Why is that the case? Is it because they are unable to buy food? Absolutely not. That is purely because of the fact that they don't have enough awareness of what constitutes a healthy diet. This leads to overweight, obesity conditions, and other types of lifestyle diseases like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, etc. So that is where awareness is a major issue, and then you have acceptance that in many cultures, in many different areas, you have a certain traditional customary diet which is consumed. Now, that is where accepting a new dietary or a culinary taste is something which is not acceptable. So that is where these 4 A's become a reason. This will include the socio-economic conditions or the socio-cultural beliefs, then would include the awareness factor, that is the knowledge about it, the income factor, the income gap, and also the food availability. That is, availability talks about the enough food production. That is the aspect of food security. So this covers the entire gamut of the quality of nourishment which is lacking. Now you see, one of the parameters for measuring the quality of nourishment or the aspect of undernourished is global hunger index. Now this global hunger index is one of those parameters which paints India in very poor light. That is why it is not accepted by the country. But then, obviously, that is partially because of the kind of questions which are being framed to measure the responses of the hunger index. For example, one of those very controversial questions is if you had how many of you feel that with more money you could have better food? Now, there will be very few people who will not opt for yes in this particular case. So, they are qualified under undernourished. So, that global hunger index, it is controversial in our country. It is not accepted in our country. It puts India behind many of the African countries as well in terms of the food availability. But this hunger index needs to be taken to the quality of food or the quality of nutrition just rather than the quantity of it. It is not that people in our country now have the absolute lack of food availability. We have well-developed public distribution systems, etc. So food availability is there. But is the quality of nutrition available? That is where this hunger index should be utilized. But nonetheless, this hunger index becomes relevant for your prelims examination. It has been asked in the prelims already once. So what are the parameters for which is measured by the global hunger index? So basically you will observe that there are 4 such parameters. Undernourishment, right? So percentage of population that doesn't have enough calories intake. Then child stunting, right? Where the children under 5 who don't have the height which is required or expected at their age. Child wasting, right? Where they are too light for the height that they have, they don't have the muscle mass development. And child mortality, the children under 5 who basically are not able to survive. So this is the aspect of hunger index, and that has to be extracted. Those particular amount of parameters which are given by the hunger index needs to be extracted for getting or gauging an idea about nutrition that we have. We have to provide our population with nutrition. Only then can we expect a wholesome growth of the human capital and utilization of the demographic dividend that we keep on boasting about. Okay, so that is a kind of a way forward. So in a brief gist or a crux, what have we discussed in this article? So in this article, we started with the concept of undernourishment, the SDG goal for zero hunger, which is the number 2. Goal number 2 is about zero hunger. Now, what are the challenges associated? You have climate vulnerabilities, you have price shocks, you have global conflicts. These are the challenges associated. Then after that, we looked into the features and the biases of undernourishment and the 4 A's, why undernourishment happens. Then the quantifiable metric about the cost of healthy diet. That cost of healthy diet is disproportionately high in countries of Asia. And that would mean that people, even though after spending 100% of their income, still you will have more than 50% of our rural population as per 2011 census who don't have access to healthy diet. That calls for what? More welfare programs, more welfare schemes, and greater amount of accessibility. Then we talked about the importance or the factors of accessibility, availability, awareness, and acceptance, how they become an important parameters in terms of availability of food and the availability of nutrition. And then we talked about the global hunger index and what to be extracted out of it. Okay. Now let us take a look at the practice question. So discuss about the features of undernourishment as observed across the world. Suggest some measures to improve the conditions in developing countries. Now this is a 10-marker question. So here in the intro, what needs to be written? So in the introduction, straightforward, you need to mention about what do you understand by undernourishment, right? Lack of necessary intake of the micronutrients as well as the macronutrients required for the healthy growth of the body. That is it. So when you don't have that, that is undernourishment. Now here, first of all, in the body portion, you talk about the challenges, reasons for undernourishment and challenges. Then challenges here, why you have undernourishment, the climate vulnerability, etc. Reasons, 4 A's that you have to talk about. Then after that, talk about the biases, inherent bias. Why? Because it is talking about the features of undernourishment, right? What are the features of undernourishment? It is not only what is undernourishment, features of them. So reasons, challenges, inherent bias. And then you have to suggest measures. So better public distribution system, a better stock take, better welfareism, or more welfare or subsidized food distribution system. That can be one of those solutions that you can suggest. And that should be in the later part of the body. And in conclusion, you talk about that if we have to utilize the human capital and achieve the actual benefit of demographic dividend, we have to invest in nutrition. Okay. Now, coming over to the second article. The second article deals about food access is about equitable agri-food systems. Now here, this talks about the fact that when we talk about access to food, now again, our country has basically ensured that we have sufficient food availability, enough amount of buffer stocks, owing to various different factors. So when we talk about the reasons why we have sufficient availability of food, you can attribute certain reasons here. One of the reasons is the rainbow revolution that our agricultural setup has experienced. So what is this rainbow revolution? So here, green revolution talks about the increased and accelerated production of food grains pioneered by none other than M.S. Swaminathan. Blue revolution, the products of aquaculture, pisciculture, marine products, right? So aquaculture, and marine products. This is where our agricultural system, particularly in the case of blue revolution, the marine exports are becoming the drivers of Indian agricultural system. Their growth rate in the aspect of marine products is growing by double digits, whereas overall the agriculture is growing by around 2%. The food grains, the crop productivity, that is increasing by a mere 2%, which is not sufficient. But it is those poultry, it is the aspect of marine products, which is finding the export market, which is driving the agricultural growth. So this is very important for food security as well. White revolution, availability of milk. Then you had yellow revolution. Yellow revolution was for the availability of oil seeds. Now this is where We are still working to bring about a sufficiency in terms of oil seeds and oil production. Then you had golden revolution. Now golden revolution is associated with two factors. One is the increased honey production in certain areas and also with the increased fruit production. So honey and fruit. Then you basically had silver revolution. This was initiated around 4 to 5 decades back, and at that point of time the consumption of eggs was something which was promoted. Then round revolution, to do with enough sufficiency and production of potatoes. Then pink revolution. It has also something to do with the aspect of prawns or shrimp, again dealing with aquaculture. And then when we talk about grey revolution is something which has got to do with the availability of fertilizers, right? So you have fertilizers. This is pink is for prawns, shrimps. That is what it is dealing with. So this has brought about a sufficient amount of food production, not only food grains, but overall availability of other agricultural products, which is required by us. Now, this rainbow revolution again becomes relevant for your prelims exam. Okay? Now, other than that, there has been various different actions by the government like the National Food Security Act 2013. That single-handedly has been responsible for ensuring the reach of food and the required nutrition amongst the larger section of the population. But along with that, you also have biofortification. Fortification is what? Biofortification, for example, let's suppose you have a grain of rice. Now that doesn't contain many nutrients, or let's suppose that lacks certain micronutrients. So in that case, by biofortification, you enrich that grain with the required nutrients. So that is very important for developing countries like India, where not enough people have all the access to all the nutrients. Whatever food they have, that should be enriched. So that is where biofortification as well as National Food Security Act have played a role in enhancing food security and nutritional security. Having said that, there are still certain disadvantages and still certain bottlenecks that our agricultural system faces. Amongst the major bottlenecks that you can think about for Indian agriculture, you can basically categorize them into few groupings. One of the major factors is the size of land holdings. More than 80% of the population of the farmers, that is the agricultural community, close to around, let's suppose, roughly 83% to 86% as per certain figures, around 83%, let's suppose, of farmers, they belong to the category of either being small or marginal. Okay. Now these small and marginal farmers basically means they have the farmland. The size of the farmland is less than 2 hectares. So in those farmlands, obviously, they cannot deploy the modern machinery. The size is too less. They cannot invest too much in those small farmlands because the income level will be less. They cannot go for more developed variety of seeds. So overall, the production is very low. Productivity is very, very minuscule. Now also, in our agricultural system, there is an increased issue of monocropping. Monocropping means single type of crop is grown in large quantities. For example, you would have seen that only rice or only wheat, let's suppose, year after year. Now what it leads to is soil degradation, depletion of the water table. And that is a major issue. Because the degradation of the soil, the decline in soil fertility will impact the coming generation as well, will impact the overall food production as well. So monocropping is a major challenge. Then degradation of natural resources, that is, for example, if let's suppose we talk about the grain belt of India, the so-called grain belt of India, the beneficiary of green revolution, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. Now, for decades, they have been growing rice and wheat and rice and wheat. The soil fertility has declined, but also because the rice is grown in the area where the rainfall is very less, the overall water table has depleted. Now, the groundwater in those regions, they basically are contaminated with heavy metals such as cadmium, zinc, lead, and that is going to lead to further issues. Contamination in the body of the infants, the young, and the old nonetheless. So that is a major problem, right? Then you have lack of technology, deployment of technology, be it as simple as a tractor or a harvester, or let's suppose for irrigational purposes deployment of, let's suppose, the sprinkler or the drip irrigation. All of that suffers primarily because the farmer doesn't have enough money to do so. Then market access is another problem in our agricultural system, due to which you have great deficiencies in terms or discrepancies in terms of the farm income in one region as compared to the other region, because a farmer of a particular area doesn't have the access to the entire market across the nation, let alone the world global market. So unless and until that happens, farming or agricultural system can never end up becoming remunerative in the truest of the sense. Then lack of irrigation, which means that when we talk about irrigation, still almost half of our agricultural land, they don't have access to irrigation, which means that they are dependent on the vagaries of nature, that when there will be monsoonal rain, the crops will get some amount of water, otherwise the crops go to waste. Now that is a major issue. So almost 50% of our cultivable land, they don't have access to irrigation, which increases the amount of crop failures, which increases the farm distress which is experienced. This is a major agricultural problem. Then other than that, climate change is having its woeful impact in countries like India, where the extreme climate disasters have been on the rise. So these are some of the problems that our agricultural system is facing. Okay, now there are many more problems of our agricultural system, something that we keep on discussing in the sessions and the classes as well. What are the other problems in Indian agriculture that you can think about? Put that in the comment section below. Now, when we talk about right to food, then what National Food Security Act tries to do, and what should be our overall approach for the availability of food for the larger population. So this right to food is an important weaponry in order to fight hunger. So here it is important for non-agricultural households, and in the face of increasing rural to urban migration, population suffers from low income levels and lack of quality nutrition even in urban areas. So that is why availability of that food from the side of the government as a welfare measure is very much required till the country takes that leap in the developmental ladder, where the per capita income rises significantly. Then it addresses food inequality as well. So for this, what do you need? You need evolved public distribution systems. Evolved public distribution systems. And in these public distribution systems, through these, you need to be able to distribute wholesome diets, wholesome meals, quality nutrition, rather than simply going for quantity. So from quantity, we have to now switch over to quality, because quantity is already ensured owing to the steps that we have taken. But more quantity can come and better quality can come if these issues are addressed. Okay? So that is the crux of this particular article overall. What have we discussed? How we have attained a kind of a agricultural sufficiency, food sufficiency, the reasons for the same, Rainbow Revolution, biofortification, National Food Security Act. Then still we have issues plaguing our agricultural sector. Which are the issues? So there we have taken a look from lack of crop diversification, monocropping, degradation of natural resources, lack of irrigation, small farm holdings, lack of technology, etc. But there are more, something that I expect to see in the comment section below. Think about it, and you have to be unique. Then after that, the right to food, how it is an important weaponry to provide availability of food sufficiency. Okay, now let us take a look at another practice question and how to write an answer. Bring out the issues faced by the Indian agricultural system or production and its socio-economic impact. Now, this is an often repeated question and topic in the mains examination. Even in GS, even in the portion of optional when you deal with the optional such as geography. This is an area which is repeated quite significantly. So here in the introduction, how do you start? Do you straight away dive into the fact that Indian agricultural system faces with these many drawbacks or issues? No. In the intro, you talk about the importance of the Indian agricultural setup. Now, when you talk about the importance, here you highlight that it employs close to around 50%, 45 to 50% of Indian population. They are involved directly or indirectly in agriculture, and they contribute around 15% to the GDP. So that tells you about the importance of Indian agriculture. From a food scarce nation to a food secure nation, Indian agricultural system has come a long way. Having said that, there are still certain challenges which are faced. Then you start listing out the challenges, and that is something to be written in the body. When you are writing the body there, you have to adopt a kind of a writing practice, that is point sub paragraph methodology. What is that? So basically, when you write the body here, you write a particular point, you underline that point, and you write a couple of sub paragraphs there. Right? For example, lack of crop diversification. What do you mean by that? Like that, you list out the points. And then socio-economic impact of that. So what is the overall impact? The cost of production of the food is increasing. The farm income levels are reducing. The nutritional availability is reducing. The resources, the natural resources, they are on the decline. All those factors you can bring out. Okay? Now, yield can't be the sole indicator for agriculture. So when we talk about the agricultural production, how do we measure the amount of agricultural production? Let's suppose there are two farmlands, both of them are producing rice. How do we measure that which particular farmland is more productive, which is less productive? Because area can be different, region can be different. So that is something which is measured by a parameter that is known as yield per hectare. Generally, in 1 hectare, what is the overall yield? So that is calculated by the term like kg per hectare. Now, this is a terminology which is used, which has been used in our country to decide and to take decisions of agricultural productivity from time immemorial. That what is the overall production, kg per hectare, which is produced. Now, thereby, we have looked at quantity. We have not looked at the quality. Now, there are certain inherent disadvantages when you take a look only at the concept of yield per hectare in the agricultural system. So, what are the issues when you monitor yield as the only metric in agriculture? So, basically, you have an impact on health. Because when you put stress on greater productivity in the same region, how do you achieve that? Maybe greater application of fertilizers, maybe a high yielding variety of seeds. It has been found out that over a period of time, since green revolution has been introduced in our country, there has been a decline in micronutrients within the crops such as rice and wheat. For example, zinc levels in rice have fallen by 33%, whereas in wheat, it has fallen by 30%. Iron, which is very important for the body system. Lack of iron is why people suffer from anemia. People become anemic, right? So basically, iron levels declined by 27% in rice and a whopping 19% in wheat. Again, a contributor to anemic condition. Then, That is not the nutrient, is basically one of the impact of considering only the quantity, the nutrition level. What are the other things? Overemphasis on production leads to over application of fertilizers. Now this eventually leads to soil degradation. That is a major impact. And soil degradation with the passage of time doesn't allow or support natural vegetation in that area. So that eventually will lead to desertification. Desertification. Okay. Then harmful seed varieties being developed. When we talk about harmful, what do we mean by that? So when we talk about a new variety of, let's suppose, rice or wheat being developed, we talk about how much rice will be produced by planting that. But we don't talk about that how the other kinds of crops will be impacted in that region. How much nutrition or how much soil nutrients will be driven or will be extracted by that particular seed variety. So the soil becomes poorer at the end of the day. And that is where certain crop types can benefit, but overall there's a disadvantage associated. It has also been found out that in chasing that high yielding varieties and promoting that, local indigenous varieties have been lost. More than 1 lakh varieties of rice have been lost since the introduction of Green Revolution. Mind you, it is the indigenous varieties of seeds which are capable to tackle the event of climate change also, because they have a natural tendency to grow in a particular area. But also there is microfauna and microflora, the small organisms in the soil which get lost in the chase for yield per hectare. So there's a biodiversity loss as well. So if you don't follow yield per hectare, then what do you follow? In order to achieve a wholesome agricultural production, in order to achieve a nutritional balance, what do you follow? So there are certain other metrics that can be followed. For example, outcome driven metric, that is nutritional output per hectare. In 1 hectare of the agricultural land, what is the overall nutrition that you are able to drive out? Then soil biological activity. What is the biological carbon which is present in soil in a particular area? Now this can be enumerated in, let's suppose, the soil health cards. That can be included there. The soil health cards. Right? So that can be measured. That can be a unit to or a parameter to indicate how healthy a particular ecosystem is. Then landscape diversity. That whether the microfauna, microflora, that is well encapsulated or not, or whether that is getting destroyed, whether it is leading to desertification. And also degree of income diversification. For example, what is the proportion or the share of population which is dependent only on, let's suppose, one particular kind of crop. Now that means if that crop fails, then there will be income shock. Right? If that crop fails, then there can be farm distress. So income diversification. What proportion of the population of agricultural workers, they are going for animal husbandry, for example, livestock rearing, fisheries, pisciculture, aquaculture. Now that tells you that there is resilience in the agricultural system. So this needs to be brought about to bring about qualitative changes in the agricultural setup. So that brings an end to our discussion overall for all the topics dealing with agriculture in the concept of World Food Day. A brief compilation and a kind of revision for all of you, because all the matter might have become hodgepodge and mixed by now. So a brief compilation. First of all, we studied about the SDG goal 2. SDG 2 for zero hunger. Right? The challenges associated, and in the challenges, climate vulnerability, economic shock, and global conflict. Then we studied about the aspect or the features of undernutrition. Features of undernutrition. The biases which are present. And this is something where we substantiated it with the cost of a healthy diet. Cost of healthy diet in purchasing power parity dollar terms. Then we observed the 4 A's of undernutrition. Right? Then after that, we studied about what? The aspect of what do we need to attain that food security and how do we measure that undernutrition with the help of global hunger index, the 4 parameters that is relevant for your prelims. Then we studied about how India became food sufficient, rainbow revolution. Rainbow revolution. Then after that, we talked about biofortification. Then after that, we talked about the issues with Indian agriculture. Issues with agriculture. Why right to food is a necessary requirement. Then after that, we studied about issues with yield per hectare. When you use yield per hectare as a measure, and what are the alternate quantums, alternate mechanisms. Okay? Now this is overall the most holistic coverage that you can gain for agriculture, quality of nutrition and food. Ideally, I would suggest all those who are preparing for the mains examination to try to write around 400 to 500 words, combining all of this on the concept of undernutrition and India. Choose that topic, undernutrition in India, and write a kind of a short essay. Your writing practice will also improve, and then you can gain feedbacks as well. Okay, but the issues in Indian agriculture, I still expect an answer from you about the other issues plaguing agriculture in the comment section. Now moving on to the next article, deeper role. Now this talks about US's role in the region of West Asia and in the ongoing conflict in Israel and the regions of the countries of the region. So basically this article talks about the fact, it is very simple and straightforward. It talks about the fact that the Biden administration in US has largely been talked about or advocated about as the administration which has given a free hand to Israel. Now, Israel is expecting an air defense system, that is the THAAD missile system. THAAD missile is what? Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. Right. Now that THAAD missile system is expected to provide Israel with a further amount of immunity from missile attacks, rocket attacks which are happening from the neighboring regions. Overall, Biden administration, they have spent all their energy ever since last year 7th of October to ensure that its Israel-Arab coalition that US enjoys, that is intact. That is, the Arab world doesn't become reactive to Israel's actions. In the process, when Israel got a free hand, the atrocities that were committed in the region of the Gaza Strip, leading to genocidal conditions, that even alarmed the UN. And UN humanitarian mission, they have called it a kind of a war crime about the genocide which is being carried out in Gaza. But after that, even after 1 year, the condition is still as per the status quo. Still, Israel experiences that kind of a missile attack, rocket launches. The Hamas, the Hezbollah, they are still existent. And now that entire conflict is flaring up to include regions like Iran as well. In the entire process, US has provided a military support to Israel to the tune of $17.5 billion. Now, if you think about it, then basically the military industrial complex of US has had a jolly good time since the past 2.5 years or 3 years. Since the Ukraine war broke out, since the Israel war broke out, the only beneficiary has been the military industrial complex in the US. What US actually needs to understand is that Israel is completely, as per the article, what the article is talking about, that Israel is completely dependent on US support in order to carry out even an armed conflict. Without US support and without US military arms, Israel cannot carry out any individual action. Now, the article argues that this has to be utilized by United States in order to convince Israel to be more responsible in its countermeasures or counteractions. As of now, the world waits in watch as Israel has promised a punitive action against Iran as well. Where this will end could have been determined by a responsible US administration, but that is something which is again not visible for a very, very long period of time. So that is what the article talks about, the incapability of Israel and also the irresponsibility in terms of US allowing a free hand to Israel. Okay? Now, then moving on to the next one. A Nobel for explaining why nations fail. Now, yesterday we talked about the individuals who were given the Nobel Prize for Economics. Now, that Nobel Prize for Economics was granted for what? For wealth inequality, to study wealth inequality in various different cities, in different regions of the world. Now, while it is well known to everyone that colonization is one of the reasons why you have wealth inequality, the colonial powers became much more richer long time back, and the colonized powers, they continued to get on poorer and poorer and poorer. Now, what these three individuals have done, they have carried out an empirical study, that is with quantifiable data, that how certain societies, based upon the institutions that they have, the institutions that they get, whether the institutions are democratic or despotic, that ends up determining whether the societies will thrive or remain in a low income trap. And that is where yesterday also we had talked about the fact that Acemoglu in particular and Robertson as well. So basically, if you talk about Acemoglu, right, he has famously elaborated Why Nations Fail by Acemoglu and Robinson, Origins of Power Prosperity. Now, they begin the argument by saying, now this is a very nice book for those of you who are interested. They begin the argument by saying that, look, first of all, there's a classification between colonizers and the colonized. That brings about an inequality, right? You have the colonial power, colonial powers, and the colonized. But there also, all the colonized population do not have the same inequality level. For example, US, Australia, they were also colonized at some point of time, but they are much better off as compared to countries like India, countries of South Asia. Why is that? So that is something which is attributed to the institutions which are at play. So they have basically classified the institutions into two broader types. One is inclusive institutions, other is extractive institutions. Extractive, as the name tells you, will extract as much as is possible from the society. And they argued that, look, the colonizing powers like Britain, for example, take Britain for instance. Now, colonizing powers, when they were colonizing various regions of the world, they also played a role in developing institutions in that area, in those regions of the world. Now, the type of institutions that were developed, that depended on the fact whether the colonizers wanted to live in that region or whether they simply wanted to get resources from that region. Here, consider the example of Britain and their treatment in terms of colonizers in the US and in India. Now, basically, Britain wanted to live in US, get involved in US for a longer period of time. Whereas in India, they were interested only in the plunder of the resources. As quickly as possible, get as much resources from India as possible. So in India, You had development of extractive institutions. The entire public administration machinery had been designed, the criminal law system, the entire system was designed in such a way that plunder from the population could be done. Resources could be taken without much accountability. Transportation systems were developed in such a lopsided manner that it would not cater to the population but plunder of resources. Even the judicial system which was set up was not inclusive. So that is one of the extractive systems example. In US, on the other hand, they would end up developing a much more well entrenched and inclusive and democratic setup. So an inclusive institution is basically one which is democratic, right? Then one which has got, let's suppose, private property rights. As an individual, let's suppose I buy a property somewhere and I'm sure that that property won't be captured by someone else. There will be protection by the state for that particular property. I can hold it. Then what will happen? I will be incentivized that if I earn more, I can hold some tangible aspects, tangible resource, tangible wealth. So here, protection of private property is one of those in the inclusive system. Private wealth and property. Right. Now, in that case, the population is incentivized to earn more, to work harder. But then you have the extractive system as well, where it is not democratic, it is basically non-transparent, right? Non-transparent. Then after that, if you take a look at it, these extractive systems, they don't have any protection of your private property, etc. So there is increased land grabbing, property grabbing, black market system grows. So that is when the societies themselves, they do not develop to that extent. Now, it also basically is determined and decided by the administration. Let's suppose administration or the rulers in a particular country. Now, if the ruling class finds it, for example, take the case of our neighboring country like Pakistan. Now, in that particular society, the ruling class has always been the elite upper income class of the society. They have found that extraction of wealth is very easy. Extraction of and the siphoning of funds has always been very easy. So there is no incentive for the ruling class to develop a transparent mechanism of governance, citizen accountability. That lacks. And that is when overall the economic growth is hampered. But if you take a look at countries, let's suppose like India, their extraction of wealth, a disproportionate asset, it is not so easy. So that is where there is always an incentive for the ruling class also to devise mechanisms so that everyone is accountable, so that it is not kept by a few people. And that is what keeps the system a bit honest. So that is where even the administrators and the ruling classes, they end up determining the fate or the destiny of the different societies. So that is the work that they have done. That is the work for which they have been able to prove, with which they have been able to prove why there is a different pathway taken by societies which generates wealth inequality overall. Okay? Now, then on the need to make more containers to boost trade. So basically, a simple argument. When we talk about trade, now trade and export and import is very important part of our economic journey and our economic growth. Whenever we forecast to become a $5 trillion economy or a 10 trillion, 20 trillion, whatever might be the aim, trade is an important part there. But that trade suffers from bottlenecks. What is the bottleneck? Containers. Because when we talk about transportation of goods, how do the goods get transported? Is it in the plastic carry bags out there? No, containers. Containers which generally have a uniform size, measure, etc. What is also known as a 20-foot equivalents, TEUs. Now, as per the requirements, or as per the present condition, overall if you take a look at it, then presently our capacity is around 11.4 million 20-foot equivalent units TEUs in 2023. Now this is supposed to increase or almost more than double to 26.6 million TEUs by 2026. So that means we need to be producing more containers, as simple as that, which we are not. Presently, our overall production of container, if you take a look at it, then India manufactures close to around 3,000 to, or rather 10,000 to 30,000 containers with an average price point of $3,500 to roughly around $4,000, right? Whereas our immediate neighbor, China is able to manufacture 2.5 to 3 million container boxes every year at almost half the price of India. So as a consequence of that, what happens? Let's suppose we have to trade in something. We have to go for export or import. Then we lease out the containers. You have lack of availability of containers. So leasing happens. And leasing happens from where? From China. So what does it do? It increases the overall cost of transportation. But also lack of availability of containers mean what? There's a greater amount of money required for booking the containers also, isn't it? So we need to be self-sufficient in terms of container production. That will be utilized by the world also. We can be one of those exporting countries as well. And when we produce at large scale, our overall cost of production will also come down. Presently, the cost of container that we produce is much higher than what China utilizes or China manages to produce it in. So that will come down. Then after that, there are other bottlenecks as well. When we talk about our ports, now ports do not have enough space or the handling capacity of for the containers. Many of them, the infrastructure expansion has not happened. So as a consequence of that, the turnaround time in our country for the ports is still very high. Turnaround time is still very, very high. So due to this, what happens? The ships which are ideally destined to come to India, let's suppose the ship, if you can look at the world map in the background, the ships, if they are destined to come to Mumbai or anywhere else, rather than that, they go to the Colombo port, the larger ships. They go to the Changi port here in the region of Singapore here. And basically, as a consequence of that, the larger ships visit there. So those regions become the transshipment hubs. They benefit economically. From there, small feeder ships, they come towards India. So our port capacity needs to be expanded as well, because majority of the trade in the coming decades is going to happen through maritime, as is the case now also. In terms of volume, majority of the trade takes place through the maritime domain. So that needs to be worked around. Okay, so this will bring about overall logistical efficiency. When logistical efficiency is achieved, your cost of product goes down because you are spending less amount of money in transportation, storage, etc. And due to global supplies there and the global conflict, anyways, commodity prices have increased, the insurance cost on the containers, etc. have increased. So those countries like China, which have managed to keep the container cost and everything still to be very low, their products are more attractive in the international market. So that is very important in order to dominate the export market of the world. And India needs to do that. And one of the ways is increased amount of container production. Okay. Now, then another article, that coastal flooding harms different tree species differently. So this is about a detailed scientific study which has been carried out to study or to understand that rise in sea levels, how does it impact various varieties of trees. Now, this has been studied in the region of US, but then the entire aspect or the mechanism of it is applicable across the globe as well. What has been found out that when there is a rise in sea level, let's suppose this is the sea level, and here you have certain vegetation. Okay, here you have certain vegetation. So when the sea level rises due to thermal expansion, due to rising sea surface temperature, due to the fact that there is, let's suppose, increased glacial melt, ice melt, etc., because the sea level has been rising. The World Meteorological Organization report of 2023 that has indicated, and even the State of Oceans report by UNESCO in the year 2024, they have indicated that up till around 1993, the rise of sea level was almost at a rate of 2 millimeter per year. But now, after 2018, that has been found to be close to around 4.5 millimeter per year. So that rise in sea level, even in quantifiable terms, is increasing. So the trees and the vegetation have certain responses. Some of the tree species have been found that they end up spreading more landwards in order to have a tolerable limit of water availability, etc., salinity conditions, etc. Some of the trees have been found to grow more rapidly so that they can have a substantial portion above water. So that is how different species, they interact or react differently. How is it studied, by the way, that how the species of trees have grown during adverse climate or during different climatic conditions? That is studied by a mechanism of science which is referred to as dendrochronology. That is basically studying the climatic conditions which would have prevailed in that time by studying the rings of the trees. So when you consider the tree trunk has got various different rings associated. Now each of these rings basically indicate the conditions during the time of the growth. Why? Because when we talk about the rings of the trees, they include the vessels carrying nutrition and water, the xylem and the phloem. Now let's suppose the conditions are very adequate. Moisture availability is there for a tree. There is adequate sunlight available for the tree. Then what will happen? The trees will grow very nicely, quickly. The vessels will become very extensive. So that is when the rings will be very wide. And then let's suppose you have a condition where the situation is very adverse. Climate is very harsh. You don't have enough water availability. So enough vessels carrying water will not develop around the tree. So that means what? You have thinner rings, right? So with the help of that, one is able to understand the climatic history of a region based upon the tree rings. This is known as dendrochronology. So thinner annual rings reflect years of lower precipitation, thicker rings reflect years of higher precipitation. So with the help of this, scientists are able to calculate in the older trees and even in the fossils of the older trees that what the climate would have been hundreds of years ago, which is the year when drought would have been experienced, severe drought would have been experienced, and so on. So as the tree grows, it keeps on developing the rings, right? So that is something which has been used to understand the mechanism of the adaptation of the trees or the reaction of the trees owing to climate change and owing to sea level rise. Now the impact or the overall influence of this study is also significant. It can help us develop region-based solutions. Region-based solutions. That in a particular area, what should be the solution which should be provided, right? Then after that, it can be used to understand that which species is more impacted due to the sea level rise. So accordingly, you can have species-based intervention. If a particular species is getting impacted more, translocation should be done. So this will help us fight the sea level change and the sea level rise which is experienced across the globe and save natural biodiversity in a particular area. Okay? Now coming to certain articles relevant only for your prelims. So basically, India and US have concluded a $3.5 billion deal for procurement of armed UAVs. And this is about the MQ-9B armed drones. 31 of them. Right. Now this is to be distributed amongst the 31. These will be distributed amongst the Navy, where it will be referred to as a sea guardian. It is referred to as a sea guardian. It will enhance our maritime reconnaissance and surveillance capabilities. Presently, for maritime reconnaissance and surveillance, we have the Dornier aircrafts and the P-8I aircraft, which is supplied by Boeing. Now, P-8I aircrafts, they are not so large in number. They are very effective nonetheless, but they have been going through a lot of wear and tear, and they require high level of maintenance owing to their increased usage. Now, these sea guardians will allow for increased surveillance in larger areas of Indian Ocean region by India, particularly in the marginal seas of Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, and fight off the incursions by the Chinese Navy. Then you also have the sky guardians, which will be procured by the Navy, by the Air Force and the Army for surveillance in other bordering regions as well. Now, this is a deal for the particular sea guardians and the sky guardians, as well as there has been a deal which has been done for the maintenance and the MRO deal, which is referred to, that is the maintenance, repair and operation of this. So, the logistical supply along with the provision of Hellfire missiles, the captive training Hellfire missiles as well as the armed Hellfire missiles, they will also be supplied as per the deal. So, these are the associated benefits. Then, Center sets up 3 AI research hubs on health, agriculture and cities. So, it has set up Center of Excellences. Center of Excellence, that is for health, agriculture and also for the case of development of sustainable cities. Sustainable cities. Now, various different institutions have been made the nodal bodies and the nodal setup for these. So, for health, you have AIIMS Delhi, right? AIIMS Delhi and IIT Delhi. They will provide interventions. They will be the nodal institutions which will talk about the AI powered centers which will give health interventions in Medicare devices, etc. For agri, IIT Ropar is the nodal organization or the institution rather. And for sustainable city, IIT Kanpur. So, these are your various centers of excellences, and the purpose is they will not only help in the development of the health setup, agricultural setup and the urban environment, they will also help in better job creation, more sustained management and sustained growth in these areas as well. Okay. Now, sufferers awarded. Now, this is an editorial piece which talks about the importance of denuclearization in the face of the fact that Russia has warned the world that it will unleash a nuclear warfare if the Americans keep on supplying weapons to Ukraine. Now, in the face of it, the Nobel Committee has basically appreciated and rewarded the survivors of or the group working towards the rehabilitation and awareness raising campaign of the Second World War nuclear bombing. Till now, nuclear weapons have been utilized only by US in the war field, right? And it was used in Japan. While almost 1.5 lakh population was decimated almost immediately and due to the impact of the radiation, you still had survivors from that who suffered from the impact of radiation. So those survivors of that nuclear warfare, so those survivors, they are named as Hibakusha. Hibakusha. Now, they have toured the world in order to raise awareness against nuclear warfare. They have visited India also, and that is where they are very important. Now, there is a group, right? So, that is Nihon, Hidankyo. Now, this is the organization which has worked tirelessly in order to raise the plight of the Hibakusha. Because, understand, regardless of how liberal a democracy US might sound to be today, but US has traditionally, as the article also argues, has traditionally always engaged in suppressing the plight of the Hibakusha or the people who suffered from the nuclear disaster or the nuclear bombs. All the news talking about the suffering of the people, they had been censored across the globe. So that is when Hidankyo, that is the organization, has significantly worked in raising the awareness, which has been identified by the Nobel Committee, and they have got the Nobel Peace Prize. So here, these two names, what do they refer to? That is important for your exam, for the prelims. Now the last article. Government seeks to rein in the firm's greenwashing Indian consumers. So what is the concept of greenwashing? Greenwashing basically means, let's suppose I as a firm, I have a firm, let's suppose ABC. Now, ABC can declare that we are 100% eco-friendly. We ensure the preservation of species. We ensure sustainable planet. But then in reality, I don't. So that is greenwashing, right? For example, you would have seen many hotel chains. Now, hotel chains will say that in order to conserve the planet, try to reuse the laundry, right? Now, you think that they are climate sustainable, but in reality, they are simply saving their laundry bill. So, that is basically the concept of greenwashing. Now, in many of the advertisements also you would have seen on TV that you have terminologies like 100% climate friendly, eco-friendly, etc. Conservation of trees. Now, the government has said that if you are making these claims, bring forward the study and the tangible amount of data which supports your claims. Otherwise, don't make a claim. And don't use hi-fi terminologies such as environmental impact assessment, ecological footprint. Explain it to the consumers as well. Why? This would lead to responsible consumption. And that is something which will eventually lead to responsible production as well. Transparency will be maintained by the organizations, and that is when overall systematic climatic conservation can be ensured. So what is greenwashing? That is relevant for the examination, and the new directive by the government is for the organizations to be more transparent and in a way authenticate the claims that they make. So that brings us to the end of the discussion for the day. I hope that all the 11 topics have been understood in detail. I would suggest and advise you to do visit our Telegram channel at the end of it and take a look at the quiz in order to understand what is the overall assessment level. And then also try to write the answers for the questions and try to write the essay that we have talked about, undernourishment and India. If you have liked the session, please don't forget to bless us with your like, share and the subscribe button and put the comment section below. Now, till we meet again, do revise, do take care of yourself, and I'll see you again on the weekend with the episode of the Places in News, where we bring for you the various different areas which have been in news over the past 15 days. I hope that solves the purpose of your revision as well. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you.